Hey internet friends, I don't know about you, but November 2020 is by far the longest month of my life. On a personal level, it's the last month of my first pregnancy. We're officially on baby watch. Meanwhile, on a national level and beyond, such strange events are unfolding before us, and while this year has been a time of acceleration, it's also somehow moving at a snail's pace in regards to the circus show known as the United States presidential election. But like I said, the month is dragging on. I've had a lot of time to consider all the possibilities of how 2020 ends and 2021 begins. I mean, it's either me speculating and sharing my observations on this topic, or I'll spend my time reorganizing all the closets in the house, pacing down the hallways and scrubbing the baseboards, or, in a more degenerate hour, binge watching the Great British Baking Championship. Which would you rather me do? Before I relay one of my top picks for how I see the election scenario playing out, I want to share with you an uplifting story. Lord knows I haven't shared one of those in a while on this channel. So let me set this up for you. The same week I found out I was pregnant, the news about COVID hit the United States and talk of 2 weeks of lockdowns to slow the spread emerged. School was canceled, small businesses closed, toilet paper flew off the shelf, Zoom calls took off, Amazon orders piled up. You get it, you remember. Well, anyway, for my entire pregnancy, for all of my prenatal appointments, I've seen this midwife practice that's located in a traditional medical complex. When I pulled up to my very first prenatal appointment, the medical facility had erected this giant white tent in the parking lot that hadn't been there the week before. In order to pass through the front door, you had to call up to the office, check in over the phone, and they instructed you to go through the COVID screening tent in order to be granted access to prenatal care. Once I got in this tent, there's this lady who would stop and ask me questions about if I've coughed in the last week or been around anyone else who's coughed in the last week. At the end of the questioning, she'd put a participation sticker on my shirt and send me on my merry way. I noticed that people with masks got to bypass the screening and go straight up to their appointments. Anyway, if you don't know, if you have a low-risk pregnancy, you go to your appointments typically once a month until you're 36 weeks pregnant. And then you go every week until you have the baby. I've been going every week, and I had an appointment on Monday, November 2nd, the day before Election Day, and the tent was still there. I remember this vividly because the lady doing the screening yelled at me because apparently I started walking off before she got done with her questions. She was so mad I couldn't help but laugh at her, but my point is, the tent was there the day before the election. 1 week later, which would have been yesterday, I go to my appointment. Election Day has passed, and Joe Biden has been named the president-elect by the news media. Guess what's nowhere to be found? The tent. The tent is gone. The COVID screening tent is gone. It's nowhere in sight. So can we get a round of applause for President-elect Joe Biden? Incredible work. Last week, I put out a video on Election Day covering an article that was released that morning. The article was by Axios, and it laid out the framework for how Biden would secure a presidential victory, saying that if news organizations declared Biden the mathematical victor, then he planned to address the nation as leader, even if Trump went to court over election fraud. And that's exactly how it went down. Essentially, the media called it after a few days, and the Biden campaign ran with it, even though it's still being contested and there is obvious election fraud. But since the media outlets called the victory, they refused to cover any election fraud. It's just a matter of their headlines molding reality into whatever they wish it to be, and then echoing and amplifying that reality through social media outlets, censoring any news stories or voices that challenge them. Now, Biden supporters are relishing in their victory, and Trump supporters can't even hear what the president has to say because the news cuts him off anytime he starts talking. And Twitter has censored most of the president's tweets. For the last several years, I've critiqued Trump on the basis that he put Zionism ahead of the United States, at the expense of the lives and liberty of all Americans. It really seems like no matter who you vote for in the election, red team or blue team, they've all got one thing in common: an Israel first mentality. Plus, Trump seems to be a huge proponent of Big Pharma through Operation Warp Speed. But you'll never hear me say Orange Man bad, because to Trump's massive credit, he's been so key in exposing the rottenness that is the mainstream media. It's caused a lot of folks to do a double take and question the lies that the news media cranks out on the daily. It's a strange relationship, the one between our current sitting president and our media. The more cynical among us might speculate that's by design. Trump is basically the best thing to happen to MSM. Without him, their viewership would have plummeted into oblivion in the age of everyone canceling their cable. Combine that with the fact that 2020 is the year of orchestrated chaos. And we've got record numbers of people tuning into the 24-hour breaking news cycle to find out what's happening with the virus, riots, and presidential election. And when I ask the question of who has benefited the most from the past year, my answer falls on technocratic billionaire wallets, the continuity of global government, and mainstream media. And here's the point of this entire video. This is why I believe the election isn't over yet. Even though the media has declared Biden president-elect, more viewership and more chaos through election coverage can only be achieved by calling a Biden victory early, only to have to backpedal in coming weeks. And then all hell would break loose, and all hell breaking loose really benefits the bread and circus aspect of our reality, keeping us glued to our television screens and our hands at each other's throats in further division. The word of the hour is civil unrest, so take that for what it's worth. Civil unrest lends itself to more top-down control. Create a problem, control the response, manufacture the solution. Problem, election fraud. Response, civil unrest and spread of COVID throughout the winter. Solution, curfews, surveillance, martial law, etc. My assertion here is supported by data that casts intense doubt upon election results, which includes but is not limited to the fact that Democratic legislators massively push for mail-in voting. But the problem with mail-in voting is that these legislators knew that states would be overwhelmed by this process and they would have trouble establishing validity and legality of votes coming in by mail. Furthermore, Sidney Powell, the Trump campaign legal counsel, reported that over 450,000 Biden-only ballots were sent in across the nation, meaning that on these ballots, voters voted Biden only. They didn't even bother participating in the state and local elections on the ballot. Finally, if you look at plausibility and numbers, things are a little fishy. For example, in Australia, voting is mandatory. If you don't vote, you are subject to being fined. In Australia's most recent election, voter turnout was 92%. Compare that to the state of Wisconsin, where voter turnout was above 90% of registered voters. Now, could I be wrong? Of course I could be wrong, but look around, reflect on the past year. Life as we know it is completely different. It's their new abnormal. Why wouldn't our political system, our elections, follow suit? In my opinion, an attempt to overthrow America has occurred in 2020, and the finale of it is playing out right now. It's amazing to me that anyone still has faith in the electoral process. Am I imagining things, or did the lefties just spend the last 4 years screaming that Russia meddled in our elections? And now Red Team gets their chance to be disenchanted. Who would actually go out and vote 4 years from now after witnessing an orchestrated and public takedown of the American political system?
Every legal vote to be counted, and we want every illegal vote to be...
I just think we have to be very clear. She's charging, the other side is welcoming fraud and welcoming illegal voting. Unless she has more details to back that up, I can't in good countenance continue showing you this.
My point has pretty much always been the same. It's clear that the news media does not want to give you the opportunity to decide for yourself what you believe. They aim to manufacture reality by stating the intended message, propagating it through the television, amplifying it through social media, and finally, censoring and suppressing all those who challenge it. The last clip I showed you was from Fox News, a go-to news station for many conservatives in juxtaposition to CNN, which we all know caters to Blue Team. But Fox News has always been lying to you, tailoring their propaganda to the right, to Red Team, so it marinates without much resistance and questioning. They've been socially engineering conservatives this entire time, only now it's right in your face. How many years until Fox News starts showing 11-year-old Desmond is amazing dancing for money in the street and framing it as a positive step in the right direction? Let's face it, they're really no different than CNN. So my question for you is, how will 2020 end? Will 2020 end, or will it just go on forever with medical tyranny and election drama dragging on for the foreseeable future? Let me know what you think. You know I always look forward to reading your comments. Thank you so much for watching and subscribing. If you want to support my channel on Patreon, I would greatly appreciate it.